You're welcome to today's class once again. My name is Rogers Matievere from the Faculty of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, Department of Agriculture and Resource Economics, Mountains of the Moon University, and we are still continuing with our course, the Institutional Framework for Agroecology. And in the previous lesson on topic 6, we already looked at the certification. We said that there are certificates given to a certain group of farmers who follow certain standards. And we saw the categories of these certificates or certification schemes, the challenges, and the procedures. Now, in today's lesson, once again, we're going to look at the standards, the food standards, the agri-food standards, agriculture and food standards. Now, what are these standards? Of course, we know that to be able to participate in the international market, our food should be able to meet a certain procedure that is acceptable at that level. Now, standards by definition are guidelines used as trade protection measures designed to manage the spread of animal and plant pests and diseases, and also avoiding the contamination of food. So we don't want to supply maize which has aflatoxin because of poor drying. It must fulfill a standard. So these standards are always defined by who? Certain standards are defined by the private sector, others are defined by the public or government. We already mentioned this under the government policies. Now, what are the types of standards? Standards can be public standards, that is, guidelines set by government based on the international procedure. If the government comes and says, internationally we need to produce coffee that fulfills this standard set by the world market, then we call that a public standard. And of course, these ones are regulated by the World Trade Organization. It's the one which they offer, the umbrella organization which controls the trade across the globe. But sometimes there are certain organizations which are not government. They may be international or national, what we call the private, they set what we call private standards. So private standards are guidelines set by the private sector or civil society organization. For example, we talked about Fair Trade Organic, or Fair Trade International, Certified Organic, UTZ, Certified. These are private. Maybe the one that as we grow or produce certain crops, we need not to interfere with the environmental issues, with the degradation. We need to protect birds. We need to protect the water resources. So they come in and help. Of course, these private standards sometimes work hand in hand to fulfill the public standards. But then, what do standards cover? What should be covered within the standards? When we are defining these standards, these quality guidelines, what should we have? Now, one aspect that the standards of food standards cover is the plant and animal health. I know most of you, when you are moving, you just carry the hen upside down, and then you are transporting, you find that someone is carrying the chicken on the borders, and they are really suffering. With food standards, you cannot be certified to do that. Some of you have, the slaughterhouse. They always actually beat us at home. If they are tying a goat because they are going to slaughter it, you children come and say, "Ha, we are eating you." Somewhere actually they say that those words can even affect the quality of meat for that animal. If you if you overdo that, even if you know the animal is for killing, you're not supposed to keep beating it and harassing it and shouting at it. So plant and animal health standards are also key as part of the assessment procedure for one. So they are also covered within the standards. Then we have what we call environmental standards. Are we following certain aspects of the environment? Where is it going to cause, is your activity, say coffee production, an environmental hazard? Most of you recently were complaining about the coffee bill. The coffee bill is saying that now, because internationally they are saying coffee is the leading destroyer of the environment in terms of deforestation. So they want the government to control the coffee production and make sure that every coffee has a certain number of trees planted to make sure there is a restoration program which is embedded within this bill. So environmental standards, we are saying that our activity as agroecologists should be able to conform to the environmental standards. Then another standard that is covered, another thing that is covered within the agricultural standard is the social and ethical issues, ethical standards. Who works within your labor? How are you treating labor? Are you segregating? You are promoting agroecology, but you are not allowing women to work in your garden because they are slow. Then they will not certify you. You have not met the standards. That's a social exclusion. We need social inclusiveness. Children should have their own section on your farm. The disabled, their own section. The youth, their own section. The elderly, their own section. So that's what we call the social and ethical issues. But of course, applying the standards is also challenging lately. So everything that we want to do, there will always be a limitation. One of the challenges is that the standards may be applied in a discriminative way. Someone inspecting will come to your farm and he finds you're not employing women, but he goes to another and finds they are employing, then they all certify you. Somewhere, there are human beings who are ticking the boxes. So sometimes they discriminate. And developing countries may lack administrative and technical capacities to fulfill the requirements. They are saying these standards should cut across, whether in UK, Belgium, Uganda, all the same. But how are we going to do that? Is the Ugandan farm having the capacity to maintain certain standards? Then another challenge is that the high cost of implementing the standards undermine the comparative advantage. And developing countries are also faced with institutional weaknesses. We can see a lot of corruption in our country. And if they are the people, like for example, UNBS is the one which is approving the kombuchas, and is Gabano within the process. So it means somewhere there's some compromise within the week. And then lastly, one other challenge is there's inadequate support. Despite the provisions within the World Trade Organization, some developing countries are still struggling because of the poverty. And nevertheless, we still see food standards gaining ground, especially within agroecology, within organic farming. They are applying food standards. The concept of food standard certification schemes is rising. And why? What are the reasons behind that? As you can see there, why are the agri-food gaining ground? Why are they increasing? One of the reasons that they need to provide information to the consumer. Why are food standards more advocated? Because we need the consumer to be aware, to be knowing what he wants to consume. What materials did you apply to produce this product? You don't want to hide any information. Then the second reason why we need food standards implemented across the globe to reduce the costs imposed on consumers consuming and feed. Many people are having cancers. Treating cancer is a problem because people are really consuming a lot. So we're saying that instead of waiting for people to go to the hospital, why can't we already control it at production level and people produce? So we need to control such diseases at a low cost. And also another reason why we need food standard, there's increased need for trade in fresh and perishable products. People are talking about greens now. Everywhere, every meal greens. But remember, these greens are carrying a lot of chemicals. People are spraying tomatoes out and after harvesting them, and then they are taking them to the market. And for me, I'm going to eat this tomato as a salad. So I've eaten the chemical directly. So the increasing consumption of perishable products or fresh products is already calling for the standards at the farm level. Then there is increasing influence of supermarket. Everyone is now talking about supermarket. They are no longer going to the gardens. So if we are buying things from the supermarket, and the supermarkets always know that you cannot buy a rotting mango from a supermarket. The concept of a supermarket means high quality product. So if you have to have the high quality product, it should be of a standard. So that's why we need food standard. And lastly, we see that there are many changing consumer demands and technology. Usually maybe there was no way of testing the quality. It was not easy. But now almost someone like someone is carrying, wants to test if milk has water. He's carrying, is it called a robot? I don't know, maybe something like that. But they eventually just put, that's technology increasing, meaning that there are easier ways of now determining whether a product has followed the standards or not. Now, what does it mean if developed countries impose food standards to the people? Is it good for Africa? Is it good for Uganda? Now, what are the implications of promoting food standards everywhere? We see food standards can be a barrier for trade. We saw some people may not participate. So food standards can be barriers. They eliminate some people from participating in international trade because they are not fulfilling them. But at the same time, food standards can be catalysts, can promote, meaning that maybe if US was not buying cotton from AGOA, you remember AGOA program in the past? African Growth Opportunity Act. So meaning that by setting standards that once Uganda is able to meet that one, then eventually there's no automatically it will cross to America to sell their cotton or other products, because they have, by having the food standards even communicated to the farmer will already produce knowing that these standards are required, and therefore it will be very easy to penetrate the market. Otherwise, without standards, we are growing products in the darkness, and then eventually at selling it, that's when you tell us, this is not the standard they want. How would I have known? But by promoting food standards, I'm going to follow these standards strictly. Then I will come to the market and sell my product. Then I will have no any further restriction. After all, I was able to follow your standards. So standards can be also catalysts. Catalysts is something, you know how we define the enzymes, speeding up. So food standards can speed up the international trade, but sometimes food standards can be a barrier because it eliminates some people from participating in the market. So far we have covered quite some good topics. Now we see in the next topic, we're going to look at now the contemporary cross-cutting issues in agroecology. We are going to move a little bit and see a number of scattered topics and how they are affecting agroecology, things of gender, culture, and maybe indigenous knowledge, biotechnology, artificial intelligence. So we're going now to comment on that topic, and we're going to call it the cross-cutting contemporary issues influencing institutional framework for agroecology. See you next time.